In 1997, a McLaren engineer sat in a workshop and had an idea so simple, so cheap, and so devastatingly effective that McLaren nearly rewrote the entire history of Formula 1 because of it. The idea cost £50 to build. 50, not 50,000, not 50 million, £50. And that £50 idea gave McLaren such an absurd advantage over every other team on the grid that when the rest of Formula 1 finally discovered what McLaren was doing, they did not just want the idea banned, they wanted the idea erased, wiped from the record books, forgotten. Because what McLaren built inside the cockpit of a Formula 1 car was so clever, so disruptive, and so embarrassingly simple that it made every other team in Formula 1 look like they had been asleep for decades. And the way McLaren got caught, that might be the wildest part of all. Let us go back to the beginning. The late 1990s were one of the most innovative eras in Formula 1 history. Teams were pushing the limits of engineering and aerodynamics, hunting for any loophole in the rulebook that could shave a tenth of a second off a lap time. McLaren's chief engineer, Steve Nichols, had been studying a problem that every Formula 1 team dealt with: understeer. When a Formula 1 car enters a corner at extreme speed, the front end sometimes refuses to turn as sharply as the driver wants. Every team tried to fix understeer with aerodynamics and suspension geometry, but Nichols had a different idea, a radical idea so outside the box that nobody at McLaren was sure it would even work. Nichols wanted to put a third pedal in the McLaren. Not a clutch pedal, not a traditional brake pedal, a third pedal that would allow the McLaren driver to independently brake a single rear wheel while the car was still accelerating through a corner. Think about that. While the McLaren was turning left at 200 km per hour, the McLaren driver could press that third pedal and apply braking force to just the inside rear wheel. That braking force on one wheel would rotate the McLaren into the corner, eliminating understeer almost completely. The McLaren would pivot, the McLaren would bite into the apex, and the McLaren driver could get back on the throttle earlier than any other driver on the grid because the McLaren was already pointed in the right direction. McLaren called the system a brake steer device. The rest of the paddock would eventually call the McLaren system the Fiddle brake, and the McLaren Fiddle brake was about to turn Formula 1 upside down. McLaren first tested the Fiddle brake on the 1997 McLaren MP4/12, and the results were immediate. The McLaren was faster in corners. The McLaren was more responsive on turn-in. McLaren drivers Mika Hakkinen and David Coulthard suddenly had a weapon nobody else understood. And McLaren kept the Fiddle brake a secret. McLaren did not tell the FIA. McLaren did not announce the Fiddle brake to the media. McLaren simply bolted the Fiddle brake into the cockpit and let the lap times do the talking. And nobody, not Ferrari, not Williams, not a single team in Formula 1, could figure out why the McLaren was suddenly so fast through corners. But the real devastation came in 1998. McLaren had hired legendary designer Adrian Newey, and Newey built the McLaren MP4/13 with the Fiddle brake baked into the design from day one. Newey designed the entire McLaren MP4/13 around the Fiddle brake. The McLaren MP4/13 had a switchable system allowing the McLaren driver to toggle the independent brake between left and right rear depending on the corner direction. Left-hand corner, the McLaren braked the left rear. Right-hand corner, the McLaren braked the right rear. Every corner, every circuit, every race. At the 1998 Australian Grand Prix, McLaren annihilated the field. Hakkinen and Coulthard in their McLarens qualified first and second. In the race, the two McLarens lapped every single car on the grid. Every one. The McLaren was not just faster, the McLaren was in a different dimension. And then a photographer changed everything. Darren Heath, shooting for F1 Racing magazine, was reviewing his photos from the Austrian Grand Prix when Heath noticed something bizarre. A rear brake disc on the McLaren was glowing bright orange at a point on the circuit where no driver should be braking. The McLaren was accelerating out of a corner, yet the McLaren's rear brake disc was on fire. That made no sense, unless the McLaren was braking one rear wheel while accelerating. Heath and his colleague Matt Bishop put the pieces together. There had to be a hidden brake inside the McLaren. At the very next race, when both McLarens retired, Heath rushed to the McLaren cars and pointed his camera straight into the footwell. And there it was, a third pedal, sitting right there in the McLaren cockpit. McLaren's secret was out. The Formula 1 paddock erupted. Rival teams were furious. Ferrari's Ross Brawn dubbed the McLaren system the Fiddle brake and demanded the FIA ban the McLaren system immediately. Some teams argued the McLaren Fiddle brake was a form of four-wheel steering, explicitly banned under the regulations. Others said the McLaren Fiddle brake gave McLaren an unfair advantage nobody could replicate in time. And Alain Prost, four-time world champion and team owner, demanded the McLaren Fiddle brake be banned because developing a similar system would cost millions. And then McLaren's Steve Nichols dropped the line that made the entire paddock go silent. The McLaren Fiddle brake cost £50 to build. £50 worth of parts McLaren already had in the truck. The most disruptive innovation that season cost less than a nice dinner in London. But the FIA sided with the paddock. The FIA classified the McLaren Fiddle brake as four-wheel steering and banned the McLaren system outright. McLaren was forced to rip the Fiddle brake out of the McLaren MP4/13. And here is what makes this story truly legendary. McLaren still won. McLaren still won the 1998 Formula 1 World Championship. Mika Hakkinen took the Drivers' Championship in the McLaren. McLaren took the fight to Ferrari and Michael Schumacher and came out on top, without the Fiddle brake. The McLaren MP4/13 was so fundamentally fast that even after the FIA stripped McLaren of its greatest innovation, the McLaren was still the best car on the grid. But here is what Formula 1 tried to bury. The McLaren Fiddle brake was not just a banned gimmick. The McLaren Fiddle brake was the seed of a technology that would revolutionise the entire automotive industry. The concept behind the McLaren Fiddle brake, independently braking individual wheels to improve cornering, is the exact concept behind modern torque vectoring. Every high-performance car today, from Porsches to BMWs to Teslas, uses brake-based or motor-based torque vectoring to improve handling. The McLaren Fiddle brake was the grandfather of that technology. McLaren proved individual wheel braking could transform how a car changes direction. Formula 1 banned the McLaren Fiddle brake and tried to pretend the McLaren innovation never happened. But the idea migrated out of Formula 1, evolved, and became one of the most important handling technologies in automotive history. McLaren built a third pedal out of £50 worth of spare parts. McLaren hid the third pedal in the cockpit of a Formula 1 car. McLaren lapped every car in Australia. McLaren kept the secret until a photographer caught the McLaren's brake disc glowing where it should not have been glowing. Formula 1 panicked. Formula 1 banned the McLaren system. And then McLaren won the championship anyway. That is the McLaren Fiddle brake story. The story Formula 1 tried to erase. The innovation that was too clever, too simple, and too embarrassing for the rest of the paddock to accept. And now you know why McLaren's £50 trick is one of the greatest untold stories in the history of motorsport. This is the kind of story that deserves to be heard. So if you think more people need to know about McLaren's £50 trick, share this video right now. Drop a comment and tell us, what is the craziest banned innovation in Formula 1 history? We want to hear your picks. Hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications, because we are uncovering the stories that the motorsport world tried to bury every single week. We will see you in the next one.